Hey, everyone. Welcome to Locked On Lakers for Tuesday. Brian Kamenetsky, Andy Kamenetsky. One of the biggest signings for the Lakers this offseason, Gabe Vincent. Who did the Lakers get when they signed him? We'll break it down with Wes Goldberg of Locked On Heat. That's next.
You are Locked On Lakers, your daily Los Angeles Lakers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thanks to everyone for making Locked On Lakers your first listen of every day, Monday through Friday. No matter how or where you get your podcasts, it's always going to be free. It's never going to be behind a paywall. And Locked On Lakers on YouTube is where you can go to hang out with almost 20,000 subscribers to that channel. Growing super fast. We appreciate everybody's support there. Tons of people weighing in on Monday's episode, which was centered on Jared Vanderbilt and the hypothetical concept of a trade for Christian Wood with Dallas, but really just a lot of great conversation about the value of Jared Vanderbilt, which we will be discussing, bringing some of that back through the week. So please keep those comments coming. And Andy, you had a chance to talk with Wes Goldberg. He is the host of Locked On Heat here on the network. Also, allyoucanheat.com. He's the editor-in-chief there. That's the Heat section of Fansided. You guys got deep into Gabe Vincent, so let's get right to it.
How would you describe his tenure in Miami? Like, it was a pretty eventful road from him, from undrafted free agent to 2 trips to the finals, to getting a full mid-level exception, solidifying himself as a legit NBA player.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many things I can get into there. Just personally, I really enjoyed covering Gabe. He was one of my favorite players to talk to, one of the best guys in the locker room. And his overall experience in Miami has to be considered a positive one. I don't know the last time we've seen a story quite like his, where you see somebody go undrafted, basically as a scoring guard, kind of like an off guard for most of his basketball life, gets to Miami and they see something in there where they're like, you know what? We think that he could be a plus defender and even sort of like a secondary playmaker for us. And for 3 years are kind of developing him in that way and basically just changing his game altogether. And he goes from like this slashing off guard to kind of a 3-and-D guy who during that finals run started to flash some of that the slashing and the mid-range stuff that got him even to the point of being undrafted in the NBA, right? Got him some summer league invites and things like that when he started his career. So it all kind of rounded into form there during this last run. So not only just his personal development program, but then you consider the context of it all, where he kind of unseats a future Hall of Famer in Kyle Lowry, who's obviously in a different stage of his career, no doubt about it. But to do something like that and to get a starting job from somebody who's so well respected, whose best friend in the locker room is also the team leader in Jimmy Butler, to do that and get the trust of coaches and be a guy who's playing starting at point guard for an NBA Finals team, it's just really remarkable. It's a testament to his work ethic. It's a testament to Miami's developmental program. It's a testament to his relationships in that locker room with his teammates and with the coaching staff. And I think the Lakers got I think they got a good player, but even more than that, I think they're getting a positive impact guy. He talks about making the winning plays and all those kinds of things, but they're just gonna love him in that locker room. They're gonna love everything that he does, and he just brings a positive energy to the team.
Now, it's my understanding that Miami would have preferred to keep him. A, is that accurate? B, if it is accurate, why did it not happen? And I guess how much do you think it's connected to the Damian Lillard of it all?
It's very connected to Damian Lillard. They had decided they wanted to keep him, to answer your first question. They did want to keep them, and I think they even kind of penciled him into the roster next year. I hesitate to say that they planned on having him there because you never really know with a free agent, but I think we're a little surprised how high the Lakers went with their offer. They were very comfortable with an offer around the $8 million range. I have a sense that they would have went up a little bit had they been in a bidding war. If the Lakers came out with, let's call it $8.5 million a year, $9 million a year, maybe they would have come up to that number. But when the Lakers came out with like $11 million, $12 million a year, that was just sort of above where it is that Miami felt comfortable with going. And the reason they didn't want to get up to that price point is because they're looking at acquiring Damian Lillard, who's going to be making 40+ million, and upwards of like $60 million 4 years from now. So if you're going to ink Gabe to a long-term deal like that, Andy Ellsberg, who's the capologist for the Miami Heat, the general manager, he's the best in the business at figuring out long-term finances and planning in that way. And they just felt like, okay, 8-ish million, that's about where we can be comfortable being for somebody who we hope would be a backup point guard, because obviously you're getting Damian Lillard to be your starting point guard. The other part of it too is that Kyle Lowry is still under contract for another year at $29 million. Some reports about him maybe the Heat waiving and stretching his contract. I don't think that they're going to do that ultimately. They could still look to trade him, whether it's in a Lillard deal or a different kind of deal to another team. But they just felt like with all of the unknowns, they couldn't just put $11 million a year, $33 million over 3 years into Gabe Vincent, not really knowing what his role would be going forward.
So if Portland makes the playoffs, Gabe Vincent could still be on the Heat.
Yeah, I mean, I guess, right? If Damian Lillard never requests that trade and they don't get the sense that something like that could be brewing, yeah, they probably are trying to keep Gabe Vincent and either trying to offload Kyle Lowry and for some sort of other team need, right? And they would probably be willing to pay Gabe Vincent that much, thinking that he could be their starting point guard.
How much is there to his game offensively? Because more than half of his shots come from behind the arc. And at least last season, inside the arc, and particularly around the rim during the regular season, a lot of those numbers are not great.
Yeah, there are flashes of him being a 3-level scorer. He's not a great finisher. He's not the biggest guy, and that's obviously the issue there. He does have that ability to pull up from mid-range. And that was really important for Miami, especially in the playoff run after Tyler Hero got hurt after game 1 against the Bucks in the first round. They needed what Tyler Hero was so good at was coming off of a Bam Adebayo screen, stepping into a shot and taking that shot with a quick trigger, not hesitating, not thinking about it, just doing it and making it more times than not. And they needed somebody to step into that role, especially against how many drop defenses that Miami was playing in the Eastern Conference playoffs. So they basically asked Gabe to just do that. They said, hey, Tyler's down. We need you to be that guy now. Every time Brook Lopez or Mitchell Robinson or Nikola Jokic drops back when you're coming off that screen, you have the green light and you got to be quick with it. And he got really, really good at that as the playoffs went on and was actually surprisingly comfortable with it early on. And maybe that is something from his past, his basketball past, being like, okay, I could just turn this switch back on and kind of be more of a score first guy as opposed to just sort of a play off of other dudes kind of guy. So I think that's part of his game that's really going to work in LA, right? If you're playing off of LeBron, if you're playing off of Anthony Davis, the number one thing you have to be able to do is make a quick decision. Mm-hmm. Shoot that ball or put it on the floor and attack the basket and don't do anything in the middle. Don't dance around with it. You don't got time. And that's how you get off the floor real quick on a LeBron team, right? So that's, I think, his biggest and greatest attribute offensively is quick decision-making, knowing what it is that he's supposed to be doing, knowing what it is, where it is that he's supposed to be on the floor. He's just a guy who fits and specifically fits playing next to other star wings, whether it's Jimmy Butler or LeBron James, or even a big man who needs the ball quite a bit, whether it be Bam Adebayo or Anthony Davis.
With Vincent, when it comes to running sets, like he's just, I've seen him described a lot, especially now that he's with the Lakers, as a classic LeBron point guard who doesn't necessarily need the ball. But what can he do with it in terms of actually that's more traditional point guard role? Because he's never really been a high assist guy, but that doesn't necessarily mean that he can't do the stuff.
Yeah, he's gotten a lot better at the playmaking part of it. Like, he can run pick and roll for you. Like, you could put him in a pick and roll with AD, and he can kick out to your shooters. He could kick out to an Austin Reeves or something like that. Like, I would not hesitate to put him in those kinds of sets if I was Darvin Ham. You don't want him running the offense full time, but when LeBron needs that breather, when there's like those 4 or 5 straight possessions where he's just gonna kind of stand there on the wing and kind of put with his hands on his hips, just sort of waiting for his teammates to do stuff. Gabe Vincent is a guy who could do some stuff, right? So he'll run that screen and roll in the middle of the floor really comfortably. Like I said, if they're playing drop, he can come off of it, either settle into like an 18-footer or hopefully just take that 3-pointer. Or then, if he does get enough space, he can drive and kick. There's like, he's shown the ability to basically do it all on all 3 levels. It's just the finishing at a consistent level. That's not really part of his game, but when his shot is going and he's got the respect of a defense, the rest of his game tends to open up. And that's kind of, I guess that's part of being on a LeBron team is, hey, when you got it going, can you kind of keep it going, and can you make this helpful for the rest of your teammates? Like, you just think of like the past point guards that even LeBron would play with. I think about a guy like Mario Chalmers, who would have like once a week would just like go off for 18 points. And you're like, wow, this is awesome. And when you're on a LeBron team and you're getting 18 points from a guy you're not expecting 18 points from, you're pretty much winning that game. Like, that's a win. You just pencil that one in as a W. And I think Gabe can do can do that on a few occasions for them.
Defensively, he's known as a pretty active, pretty aggressive perimeter defender. How effective is he, and what makes him good? Like, what do you consider his strengths along those lines?
It's the tenacity, number one, defensively. Like, he's not even a guy that's racking up a ton of steals or anything. He'll get you a deflection here and there, but he's smaller, so he's not going to be able to guard a bunch of different positions, but he's a point guard, and that's just what happens. And so he immediately comes in for the Lakers, and he's your best point guard in terms of defensive ability, but the bar is pretty low there.
I don't know. Austin Reeves might want to have I don't know if you can do a defense.
Yeah, let's throw Reeves into it. So then if we're talking about the spectrum of the Austin Reeves level of defensive point guards and the D'Angelo Russell level of defensive point guards, Gabe Vincent is much closer to the Reeves end of the spectrum than he is D'Lo. So let's just put it that way.
I am very confident that Gabe Vincent is a better defender than D'Angelo Russell. I'm 100% willing to take your word on this because I had already decided it.
Right. It's already done. But yeah, his greatest strength on that end, he could guard two different positions. He can guard point guards. I think back to the playoff series, not this last run, but the year prior when the Heat had to play the Hawks in the first round, and Gabe Vincent hounding Trae Young up and down the court and just picking up 48 feet and just making his life miserable. Like, Gabe Vincent is the kind of defender who's just gonna make you miserable if you're a high usage point guard. And when you think about the kinds of point guards that exist in the Western Conference, Gabe Vincent being able to follow Steph Curry around all game, or follow somebody like Jamal Murray around all game, like he had to do in the NBA Finals. That's his greatest strength. He's a really good screen navigator. I think that's really important to point out. He's just really good at sticking to guys.
All right, coming up, I want to get into Gabe Vincent's playoffs because they were a real coming out party for him, but they were also a lot of the numbers were well above his averages, Wes. So I want to find out your thoughts on how real this was, and if it was real, why. So we will get into that next. Locked on Lakers is brought to you by Prize Picks, and Laker fans, if you haven't signed up for Prize Picks, you're missing out on daily fantasy made easy. Prize Picks has the best DFS prop game on the market. They offer more props than any other DFS prop operator. The superstar players, the bench players, just pick 2 to 6 players and predict whether they will notch more or less than their Prize Picks stats projections, and you can win up to 25 times your money. And Prize Picks offers projections on everything from the big 4 sports, WNBA, golf, cricket. If you're a Dodger fan listening right now, you can find projections on guys like Mookie Betts, Freddie Freeman down the line. Use the award-winning app on both the App Store and Google Play. Entries can be made in 60 seconds or less. Safe, fast withdrawals. Download the PrizePicks app or go to prizepicks.com. Sign up, play daily fantasy sports, and first-time users can receive a 100% instant deposit match up to $100 with the promo code Locked On. Again, do not forget to enter that promo code Locked On at the sign up for the instant match. If you're not playing Prize Picks, you don't know what you're missing. All right, so I mentioned Gabe Vincent. Those postseason numbers were pretty eye-popping compared to the regular season or rest of his career. In particular, he was fantastic in the Eastern Conference Finals against the Celtics, averaged nearly 16 points a game, 52% from behind the arc, 48.5% from the field, at a 29-point game 3. He had 23 points in Miami's 1 win against Denver in the finals. For the playoffs as a whole, nearly 13 points a game, 3.5 assists, 38% from behind the arc. Really good numbers. Also, though, much better than his career numbers. He's a 35% shooter from behind the arc, 33% this season. Best season ever, 37%. I guess, how real do you think what happened for Vincent was in the finals moving forward for the rest of his career? And if you do think it's real, what do you think fueled it?
I really don't know how real it is. And that was what I think made the Miami Heat a little uncomfortable about getting up to the number that the Lakers got up to was, you mentioned the best year of his career from 3-point range was a little bit higher than 36%, almost 37%. That was the only year in his basketball career that he was at that level. Like college, like that was it. He's only had one other year higher than basically 33.5%. And that was this past year. I think he was right there. I think that he's an average 3-point shooter. I think the Lakers are probably betting on him continuing to get better, which he can. And the fact that when you play off of LeBron, these shots tend to be really open. And the Heat did generate a lot of open looks. They generated more open looks than most teams in the NBA last year. But it was hard work, and Gabe Vincent was involved in that work. And it's just a little bit easier when you've got LeBron being LeBron and just finding you open shots, like rolling out of bed and finding you an open three. So I think they're betting on that part of it. I would tend to be on the more sustainable part. I think he's going to continue to get better. Who knows what's ultimately going to happen? I like that bet by the Lakers. I like that bet by them because I know Gabe's work ethic. I know that he's going to keep doing it. I know that he's going to keep trying to improve there, not just with 3-point range, but from all the other parts of his game. And the other great part about Gabe is that when he's not contributing, when that 3-point shot isn't falling, he tends to find other ways to impact the game. Like we already talked about, he's a plus defender at his position. He can do a little bit of playmaking and do those things. So, yeah, I don't know that he's going to be like NBA Finals and like that run all the time, but you're going to find spurts of it. And I think in the beauty in what it is that the Lakers built is that they now have a solid like 8 guys in that rotation that it's not going to be. They're not going to rely on Gabe Vincent the way that even the Miami Heat relied on Gabe Vincent, right? And so it's just not going to be as glaring when that shot isn't falling as it was in the past when he was starting for a playoff team. If he like we said, if he shows up once a week with a huge 3-point game, that's it. That's what you're paying for right there, plus all the other stuff that he's doing.
How much do you think of this was a positive reaction to just more responsibilities with Tyler Hero out, Victor Oladipo out, and just having the opportunity to meet a moment?
Mm-hmm. That's a really good call. I think that's a really big part of it. And it's one of the things that the coaches were always really impressed by is the more that they put on Gabe Vincent's plate, the more he would ask for. Like he never shied away. He never folded. Like every time they gave him something else to do, he was like, awesome, cool. You need to pick up this point guard 48 feet? Great, I'll do that. Oh, you need me to also run pick and roll for us? Okay, I could do that now. And he just kept doing it. Hey, we really need you to space the floor. We really need you to hit some threes tonight. He went out and did it. And I think if you're a team with title hopes the way that the Lakers are, or the Heat are, like you want guys who have shown on a big stage that they're willing to step into the moment and not step away from it. And Gabe, time after time, for now 2 playoff runs in a row, has shown that he can. So I think that part, the mentality part of it, is sustainable. I have no doubts about that.
Is there something about his personality that you think lends itself well to big moments and meeting him?
I don't know. Because in the locker room, like he's like, so one of the things I always said about Gabe was if you polled like all of the Miami Heat players other than Gabe Vincent in the locker room, all of them except Jimmy Butler would tell and just asked, who's your best friend on the team? Everybody except Jimmy would have said Gabe Vincent. And the only reason Jimmy wouldn't have is because Kyle Lowry's the godfather of his children. So Gabe Vincent was everybody's best friend. He was every media member's favorite interview. He's just like that kind of guy. He's very alphable. He's very easy to talk to. Very low key, very down to earth, like all these things. And then he gets onto the court and he's like an MFer, man. Like that dude just gets so competitive, and that flip switches, or that switch flips, excuse me. But I don't know what it is. I think this is a guy who had to work for everything that he has in the NBA, and he's never really had the luxury of saying no to anything, right? It's, hey, we need you to do this, and if you don't do it, you might be off the team. And that's kind of the NBA career, the life that he's lived so far. And so I think that's probably part of it. And, there's been a lot of guys. I know that the Heat developmental system gets like a lot of praise and stuff, but this has been like a 3 or 4 year project with Gabe Vincent. There's been a lot of guys that the Heat have taken a chance on that did not work out. It's not a 100% hit rate. They bring these guys into their G League team in Sioux Falls. They test them out there. They see what they're all about. And if they've got the stuff, they get called up and they get a chance. A lot of them don't. Gabe Vincent did.
Yeah, that actually leads me well to the next thing I wanted to ask about was just the Heat culture. How much do you think he benefited, though, from being that being the team that took the chance on him as opposed to any of the other 29 teams around the league.
I don't want to take anything away from what Gabe Vincent did. Who knows if he could have played for the Wizards and made an NBA career? Maybe he could have. I have no idea. Probably.
No, the Wizards always make it difficult for everyone, though. Let's be honest.
That's true.
I mean Rui Hachimura, I think right now would be like,
right.
Take them off your list, Wes.
Yeah, he's been playing in China right now. Any other team, you understand. I think, like, let's just take it. I'll use a metaphor from our business. Like, it takes you a little while to find your voice, right? Whether it's writing or doing radio or podcast, whatever it is. And sometimes you just need the right situation to help find your voice, the right co-host, the right producer, the right podcast network, like whatever it might be. And I think for Gabe, the Miami Heat just helped him find his voice in the NBA, which was not to be that scoring guard that he was his entire life. It was to be the kind of player that he is now. And they saw something and they nudged him in the right direction. And then he blossomed from there. Right? They planted the seeds and he grew them. And I think that's the part about the accountability and the sacrifice and the unselfishness, like that. When we talk about Heat culture, that's just sort of like shorthand for all those other things, right? And he embodied all of that when he was there. And he didn't have that ego that said, "Hey, I've been a scorer, man, like my whole life. I'm going to be a scorer in the NBA." No, man. You went undrafted. You're fighting for your NBA career right now. And so he was willing to do something different. And you also credit the Heat for showing him the different things that he needed to do. And then again, you go back to Gabe and credit him for doing those things and developing in those ways and thriving in those things and making those things his new strengths. When you think about LeBron and so the symbiotic relationship that LeBron had with the Miami Heat, one of the things that LeBron always credits his time with the Miami Heat is teaching him the professional parts of it. You know, he was always working hard at his own game, but it was the teammate part of it, the locker room part of it, the managing up and managing down part of it. And now I think everywhere you've seen LeBron go since Miami, and in Miami, obviously too, it was a very professional approach. It was very, hey, we're here to win championships. And if you're not about that, then you're fired. And then you keep moving on and you find new employees who work towards the common goal, towards the mission statement, so to speak. Gabe Vincent has the same mission statement as LeBron James. We want to win games. We want to win a championship. That's the mission statement. And LeBron is the leader in all of that, obviously, and Gabe Vincent is going to fall in line and do whatever it is that he has to do in order to help fulfill that mission statement. He's a good employee. You know, that's what Gabe Vincent does. And LeBron James is the CEO. He's the boss. He's the showrunner. He's the guy in charge. He's got the vision. He needs good employees. And Gabe Vincent is one of them.
It's actually a really good way of phrasing it, Wes, but I think also kind of an underrated part of success with this sort of thing. Like sometimes, you know, for all the talk about player empowerment and, you know, these guys obviously have more juice than, you know, the people who played in the league 20 or 30 years. For them, they make a lot more money. Sometimes I think it's healthy for everybody to remember you are an employee. Like not in the sense of trying to take away your own power, but just remembering that everybody has to be on the same page.
Yeah.
Last question I had for you.
Well, can I piggyback on that really quick?
Sure.
It's such a great point. I think it's worth spending some time on. Like before the Miami Heat, I covered the Golden State Warriors for the San Jose Mercury News out there. And one of the things that people like will ask me a lot, like, what are the commonalities between the Warriors and the Heat? Because they seem so different. Like the Heat are like a branch of the military, and the Warriors are kumbaya, Steve Kerr, everybody plays, joy of basketball. But the one thing I always found so similar between two organizations that you could argue the most successful organizations of the last decade in the NBA was just you talked from everybody from the owner to equipment guys in the locker room, and everybody has the same thing that they say about everything. Like the mission statement, the messaging is so thoroughly the same from the top down, quite literally. It was the thing that always impressed me, talking to everybody that you talked to in the Warriors organization, now talking to everybody I talked to in the Heat organization. It's just like you're talking to the same person over and over again, which is sort of annoying sometimes when you're trying to get information, but it's also like, okay, it's very impressive that like everybody just kind of has the same marching orders and beats to the same drum. And that is so important, whether you're talking about a basketball team or a Fortune 500 company or a Silicon Valley startup. Like you just want everybody on the same page. It's such an important, underrated part about the NBA.
Yeah, for sure. Last question I had for you with Vincent. Ultimately, what do you think he's better served doing, or a team is better served with Vincent as a starter, as a bench player? and not even necessarily about his talent, but just sort of how he fits with different lineups, that sort of thing.
Yeah, I don't know that I don't know that it's a difference between starting or coming off the bench for him. I think he does have to play off of another alpha kind of. He needs to play off of somebody with a real gravitational pull. And his best minutes in Miami came off of Jimmy Butler. And obviously the plus minus is always going to show that because your best players on the floor is your plus minus is going to be higher. But just like watching the game, eye test stuff, like he was most comfortable playing off of somebody else. And so I think in LA, as long as he's playing off of LeBron or he's playing off of AD, that's when he's going to be most comfortable. Now, whether or not that's starting games from the opening tip or it's just in later as you kind of go through your rotation patterns as the game goes on, or closing games. He's also a guy who I think is highly valuable closing a game because the effort and the focus, that's not going to wane. He's not a guy making mistakes late in the shot clock or in the waning minutes of a basketball game. So for the Lakers' purposes, I could see them starting with D'Angelo Russell and closing with Gabe Vincent. And
I think it's absolutely possible. Wes Goldberg, he is the co-host of Locked On Heat. This was awesome info for all of our listeners and viewers learning about Gabe Vincent. They've been very excited about the Lakers bringing him on board, and I don't think this conversation is going to dampen that at all. Really appreciate it, man. Thank you.
Thanks for having me.
Awesome. Thanks to Wes Goldberg again for his time from Locked On Heat. Plenty to unpack there and react to. We'll get to all of it next. So first of all, great interview, tons of great in-depth stuff there. I think people know a lot more about Gabe Vincent now than they did before, before the start of today's show. So that was really cool. Whenever we do one of these scouting reports, Andy, you always want to leave it feeling at least as good about the player that you're talking about as you did before you went in. Ideally, you feel a little better. And certainly I'm very confident in his fit, especially culturally with what the Lakers are trying to do.
Yeah, that was a really big thing that stood out to me listening to Wes talk about Gabe Vincent, the player, and we can get into a lot of those elements when it comes to what he does on the court. But Gabe Vincent, the person, sounds fantastic.
Yeah, for sure. And, obviously coming from we talk a lot about Heat culture. It's a cliche, Heat culture, all that stuff. But again, like you say, we can talk about the on-court thing, but like the Heat culture part of Heat culture is real. And when you get guys who are steeped in that and that Miami, it's not like they were throwing Gabe Vincent out the door. Like they would have, based on what you guys are talking about, based on everything you read, if the numbers worked out, if they weren't chasing Dame, there's a scenario in which they keep him around. It's certainly they didn't let him go because of something about how he impacts, that locker room and how he is coachable or not coachable and all that kind of stuff. And for the Lakers, and this is something you guys spent a lot of time on, they need people to be kind of part of the machine and understand your role in the machine. And nobody creates the machine better than the Miami Heat. And so, from that perspective, he's a perfect fit. He's going to fill the role that Darvin Ham and the coaching staff need him to fill night in and night out, and do his best to try to do it in the best way possible. The person that they seem like they're getting is top end.
Yeah, and then there's the actual basketball of it all, and it seems like Wes has a lot of confidence that Gabe Vincent is on a trajectory to grow. Like how much you're going to grow remains to be seen, especially for a player that is in his mid-20s. And it's obviously not impossible for guys to become better in their mid to late 20s, even in their 30s. Kyle Lowry is a great recent example of a guy that really did not come into his own until his late 20s. DeMar DeRozan actually is somebody that added a lot to his bag, and I think became a pretty different player in the second half of his career, and like where he is right now compared to where he began his career. But there still is the expectation for most players that once you reach your mid-20s, dramatic growth not impossible, but not necessarily something to expect either. But Wes does seem to feel like Gabe Vincent will, if nothing else, continue to grow incrementally, and incremental growth matters. Like that can be the difference. Incremental growth in a player and the way they contribute to advancing in a series or getting eliminated, depending on how everyone else is doing.
Yeah, and here's how I look at it, because again, we were mentioning the Vanderbilt conversation that we're having on the YouTube channel. Like, so many people point to the hard work. Like, he's such a hard worker. He's going to improve his outside shot. He'll practice it. I mean, he was a hard worker last year. He was a hard worker the year before. Jared Vanderbilt's been a hard worker from the day he walked in. He's probably just not a very good shooter, and maybe he can get a little better, but I wouldn't bet on it at this point. Gabe Vincent is kind of the same way. And so, is he going to get better at shooting? Maybe, maybe not. But, I think the other stuff, like you say, incremental growth in floor generalship, and you add a little bit, a percentage point or two to your floater, you figure out a couple things to become a little bit better finisher at the rim or whatever it might be. Or you figure out, kind of like D'Angelo Russell talked about in his much maligned exit interview, you find ways to maximize the stuff you're good at and avoid doing the stuff that you're bad at. Don't put yourself in position where you have to take shots that aren't really good for you, like whatever it might be. But what I think you get from Vincent, particularly in the slot that they've put him in, it'd be great if Vincent shoots 38.5%, best of his career by a pretty good margin. That would be awesome. It would be great, except the player he's replacing in Dennis Schröder, he wasn't a 38% three. They don't need Vincent to shoot at that level, to avoid going backwards from the perimeter. I think all of these things, because they've slotted Vincent into Schröder's position, there's the floor for Vincent in terms of what you can expect in just solid play, defensive effort, all that kind of stuff is really high. I don't know what his ceiling is, but honestly, I'm much more interested in his floor, because for starters, I think that's what matters the most. Did you lose anything by letting Schröder go and bringing in Vincent? No, I don't think you did.
Well, I one thing that I think is good with Vincent, first of all, Wes noted that even if his shot isn't falling, he typically finds ways to contribute.
Exactly.
You don't feel like he's one of those guys like, for example, Malik Beasley, where if his shot isn't falling, he really is not bringing much else to the table. Like Gabe Vincent, if nothing else, is somebody with a track record of being able to do things on both sides of the ball. He's, if nothing else, more dynamic a playmaker than, say, like Malik Beasley. There's more to his game than just the outside shot. But one thing, though, that I do think is at least somewhat promising with Vincent in terms of being able to space the floor, because, it is ideal if he can. The last 2 years of his 4-year career, his three-point percentage has been better than the first 2 seasons. And even though his 4th season wasn't as good as season 3, which was a high water mark at 36% in the regular season, it still was better than the first 2 years, and it was at higher volume. So if nothing else, he's one of those guys that you don't see the percentages go down as he's taking more threes, because that can be the case with a lot of guys. Like
it can, but sometimes volume can work kind of in both directions. And,
it can, but
he was, last year there's not a profound difference between 31% and 33%, which is what he shot in his second season versus his fourth.
No, but there's a pretty big difference between 31 and 37, which is between seasons 2 and 3.
Which one is he? Is he a 33% 3-point shooter? Is he 37? I don't know. I mean, but like I said,
but if he landed in the middle, though, at 35, that would be a massive difference between his first 2 seasons, and it would be at higher volume. So, there's a big difference between being a 35% 3-point shooter and like a 29%, which he was the first. But I'm not years.
Right. He went from 22 to 31 to 37 to 33. So, I mean, I think his floor is somewhere in the low 30s, and you hope, like you say, it gets up to 30. I'm not saying it can't happen. You will get more open shots, I think, in the Lakers offense than you will, in Miami's. I know it's something you guys were talking about. I completely agree. It's not that I don't think Vincent can shoot in the mid to upper 30s. Good. I don't think that needs to be the gauge of whether or not he's a set. It turns a solid signing into a really good one in terms of his on-court impact if he really develops into a much better shooter than he's been, in the same way that if he can figure out how to finish more effectively at the rim, that becomes something that changes it a little bit. That was something, the ability to attack the rim was something that Schröder was really good at. So I just feel like he's a very solid addition who is going to fit into what they're doing. He's going to keep the wheels moving. He's going to make the right play. He's going to be in the right spot defensively. And even if you're not spectacular, and I don't think he's going to be, that ability to, again, kind of work effectively as a part and a really important part of the larger whole, to where you're not gumming anything up, is also really valuable. I mean, that's part of the value of Reeves, is that, like you said, when he's not shooting well, when Vincent isn't shooting well, Wes talked about it, he finds other ways to contribute. When Reeves is having trouble with his scoring rate, finds other ways to contribute and doesn't make the rest of the team suffer in the process. So, I mean, I liked the signing when they made it. I really liked it after it became clear that he was a Schröder replacement. And I still like it now that I've heard that more in-depth scouting report from somebody who's watched a lot more Vincent than I have.
Yeah, the last thing I would say on that, just when you mentioned about him being a Schröder replacement, is Dennis regularly closed games. And that was something that Wes said that Vincent, he thought, he saw him do it with Miami, but he thought that he could be part of that closing group. And as much as we often harp on, is this player a starting caliber player? Would you prefer him to start, come off the bench? And was something I even asked Wes about. Whether or not you consider somebody a closing level player ultimately matters more. And that Wes feels pretty confident that Gabe Vincent is a closing caliber player. That's a nice get.
I think closing caliber player, particularly in this lineup, context matters. So I think, given who he's going to be surrounded by. Locked on Lakers on YouTube is where you can go to see the show. Lots more to come this week. Like I said, want to get back into some of these conversations that we had around Jared Vanderbilt. For Monday's show, we still have want to do a little bit of a wrap on Summer League. Max Christie, all second team Summer League. Woot. And some early numbers out from the bookies about how many games the Lakers might win. So lots of stuff to discuss through the rest of the week. Make sure you're leaving your questions and comments there. We'll see everybody next time.